Imagine carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, trying to please everyone, trying to solve everything at once. Now stop and think, how many of those worries truly matter? How many of those voices echoing in your mind are actually your own? Carl Jung once said that the greatest burden a child can bear is the unlived life of their parents, and many of us, as adults, keep doing just that, living out someone else's expectations, taking on responsibilities that were never ours, blaming ourselves for not being everywhere at once. But what if real freedom isn't about doing more, and instead about knowing what to ignore? Seneca, the Stoic sage, taught this over 2,000 years ago. The art of life lies in knowing what to disregard. It's not about being indifferent, but about being selective. And here, Jung and Seneca meet at a crucial point. When you don't know who you are, everything seems important, and that's when you get lost. The soul cries out for silence, but the mind is filled with noise. Jung's path to individuation begins exactly there, the moment you choose to quiet the world so you can hear your true self. Ignoring what doesn't matter isn't coldness, it's courage. In this video, you'll understand why Seneca's ancient wisdom, combined with Jung's deep psychology, might be the map to a lighter, truer life, one that is finally yours. But listen closely. This isn't another self-help video. It's an invitation to honestly examine everything you're carrying and finally let go. Because real transformation begins when you choose where not to waste your energy. And maybe after today, you'll never look at silence the same way again. Have you ever felt constantly tired, even when you haven't done much? As if something is draining your energy without reason? Jung believed that when we don't listen to our soul, it begins to speak through the body. That's why we often feel overwhelmed, sad, or even angry. Not because we're doing too much, but because we're not living what's truly ours. We carry the weight of ideas, obligations, and demands that don't belong to us. And worse, we don't even realize we're doing it. From a young age, we learn to say yes to please others. We say yes to parents, teachers, friends, and we grow up believing we must always be available. But this overflow of yes becomes a no to ourselves. Jung called this the shadow, all that we hide to fit into society's molds. The result is a life full of tasks but empty of meaning. The soul begins to wither when we live only for the outside world. Seneca, with his timeless wisdom, reminds us that time is our most precious resource. Yet, instead of protecting it, we give away our hours to distractions and the urgencies of others. We keep saying, "I'm busy," but rarely ask, busy with what? We're busy trying to appear important, trying not to disappoint, but we forget to ask, what do I really want? What truly nourishes me? Ignoring what doesn't matter begins with this inward look, honest, direct, and often uncomfortable. Jung believed that healing begins with awareness. It's not enough to want change. You must see what's wrong, and more often than not, what's wrong is excess. Too many expectations, too many distractions, too many obligations we never asked for but still accepted. When you start asking, "Why am I doing this?" something inside you begins to awaken. It's as if the soul says, "Finally, you're listening." At this first step, the most important thing isn't to cut everything out at once. It's to recognize what's stealing your peace. It might be a person, a routine, or even a thought that keeps telling you need to be perfect. The simple act of noticing is already a huge leap. Because, as Jung said, what is not brought to consciousness comes back as fate. And no one wants to live a fate they didn't choose. So take a deep breath and start looking honestly at what weighs you down. Have you noticed that most of the things that stress us out come from the outside world? People demanding things, social media screaming, comparisons eating us alive. But Jung taught us something powerful. Everything that irritates us about others may be a reflection of what we haven't yet resolved within ourselves. That's why we often try to fix everything around us when the real conflict lives inside. The mind screams, but the heart only whispers. And it takes deep silence to hear that whisper. Seneca said that the man who lives to please everyone forgets to live for himself. And that hurts, because ignoring what doesn't matter can sometimes feel like selfishness. But it's not. Selfishness is abandoning yourself just to avoid upsetting others. The true art lies in finding the limit. How far can I go without losing myself? Because every time you say yes when you mean no, you create a gap within yourself, and that gap grows until it becomes pain. Jung encourages us to make contact with our unconscious, the part that's buried deep within the soul. But how can we do that if we're always distracted? Ignoring what doesn't matter is also about creating space. Space to feel, to think, to listen to your body. When you silence the outer world, the inner world begins to speak. And that's where healing starts. There's no magic formula, but there is a path, and that path goes through silence. Most of the answers we seek are already within us, but we're so busy with notifications, opinions, and to-do lists that we don't realize how far we've drifted from who we truly are. Jung said self-knowledge doesn't come from looking at the light, but from crossing the darkness. And in that darkness, silence becomes a guide. Not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that welcomes. The kind that cleanses, organizes, and reveals. So if you really want to learn to ignore what doesn't matter, start today by protecting your silence. Don't answer everything. Don't explain everything. Don't justify yourself all the time. You know why? Because you don't have to prove anything to anyone. And the closer you get to who you really are, the less you need other people's approval. True peace doesn't come when everything is resolved, but when you learn to ignore what was never worth your attention. Imagine walking down a road, and with each step, someone hands you a suitcase. A suitcase of guilt, another of pressure, another of comparison. You accept them all without thinking, and then, suddenly, you're so weighed down you can't move. That's what we do every day when we let ourselves be affected by everything around us. Jung warns us, what we carry unconsciously will eventually paralyze us. That's why life feels so heavy, because we carry what we should have never picked up. Seneca taught that we're not slaves to things, but to our reactions to them. If someone offends you and you carry that hurt for days, that pain no longer belongs to the other person. It's yours now. And this is where the art of ignoring comes in. Ignoring doesn't mean pretending it doesn't hurt. It means deciding that it won to define you. It's not about running away from life. It's about wisely choosing what deserves your energy. Not everything needs a response. Not every battle needs to be yours. That's not weakness. It's emotional intelligence. Would you like me to proceed with the next section of the translation? There are about 3 more blocks to complete the full script. Jung often spoke of the true self, that self buried beneath layers and layers of masks. And every time we agree to live for the sake of pleasing others, a new mask is formed. But the soul cannot live disguised for long. Sooner or later, it screams, and that scream shows up as anxiety, insomnia, sadness. That's why ignoring what doesn't matter is also an act of self-love. It is like saying, I care enough about myself not to abandon who I am again. You are not obligated to carry your parents' expectations, or your boss's pressure, or a friend's envy disguised as advice. All of that can be returned. But first, you need to recognize what in this suitcase is truly yours, and what was placed there by others. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, begins the moment you have the courage to ask that question. And the answer doesn't come from the outside. It comes from silence, from feeling, from stopping. So today, take a look at everything you're carrying. There are things there that should have been left behind long ago. There are words you've believed for years that were never truly yours. There are wounds you've kept alive out of fear of letting go. But the truth is simple. You'll only be able to move forward once you leave behind what no longer serves you. And that, my friend, is the first step to a lighter, more authentic, and finally, freer life. Most people think change begins when they say yes to a new life, but in reality, it begins when you say no to what pulls you away from who you are. Carl Jung said there is no awakening of consciousness without pain, because awakening means denying, refusing what was long accepted as normal, saying no to urgency, to noise, to the need to prove something, and that no is silent but powerful. It's where transformation begins. Seneca, with his Stoic clarity, taught that happiness comes from living according to nature, and that includes our inner nature. But how can we live aligned with who we are if we are always saying yes out of fear? Fear of rejection, fear of seeming rude, fear of being alone. Ignoring what doesn't matter takes courage. The courage to disappoint others so you no longer disappoint yourself. And even though it may seem hard at first, it brings a kind of freedom that's priceless. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole, authentic, and unique. And this process doesn't happen when we follow external rules. It begins when we listen to our internal compass, and often that compass points far from what's expected. You might disappoint people when you start prioritizing yourself, but over time you'll realize those who feel let down didn't love your true self, they loved the role you were playing, and that sets you free. Ignoring what doesn't matter is like clearing the clutter from the corners of your mind. It's taking out the emotional trash we've accumulated for years. Thoughts we repeat without noticing, beliefs that shrink us, habits that steal our peace. Every no you learn to say becomes a yes to your soul. And when you start choosing with awareness, you begin to feel something new. Lightness, not a superficial kind, but the kind that runs deep. The kind that comes when you finally reconcile with who you are. There is no one else in the world exactly like you. And no one can tell you what's essential to your soul, except you. That's why protecting your energy, your time, your attention is a sacred responsibility. Seneca would say, life is long if you know how to use it. And Jung would add, become who you are. And becoming doesn't require more effort, it requires more presence. The art of ignoring what doesn't matter is, at its core, the art of coming home. Home to your truest self. You've spent so much time trying to handle everything, trying to please, trying to be strong. But today, maybe for the first time, you understand that real strength doesn't come from carrying more, but from letting go. Carl Jung shows us that the path to self-knowledge demands choices, and choosing always means saying no to something. When you ignore what doesn't move you forward, what remains is space. Space to breathe, to feel, to begin again. Seneca would say that life isn't short. It only feels short when we spend our days on things that don't matter. And Jung reminds us that the soul becomes sick when it lives in contradiction to its truth. So ignoring what doesn't matter isn't neglect. It's focus. It's not carelessness. It's wisdom. It's knowing where your energy is welcome and where it's being wasted. Because every day, you trade pieces of your life for something. The real question is it worth your life? Often, we think we need more time, more money, more motivation. But in truth, what we need is less noise, less pressure, less fear of being who we are. Ignoring what doesn't matter is like cleaning the mirror of your soul. You start to see yourself more clearly. And when you see yourself, you begin to accept yourself. And when you accept yourself, you begin to flourish. Not through effort, but by nature. Because everything that's true grows when it has space. Don't wait for a magical sign to change. The invitation has already been made. Your soul is already knocking, asking for your attention. And deep down, you already know what you need to let go. Yes, you do. Because at the core, we always know. We just need courage to follow that inner voice. The same courage that led Jung into the darkness. The same wisdom that led Seneca to face death without fear. It's in you. It always was. It was just hidden behind everything you're not. So, from this moment on, before you reply, accept, or engage, ask yourself a simple question. Does this bring me closer to who I am, or further away? Because in the end, the art of ignoring what doesn't matter is really the art of remembering what truly does. And what truly matters never shouts. It simply waits in silence for you to listen. You made it here, and that already shows there's a part of you longing for change. A silent, persistent call to live with more lightness, more truth, more soul. Together, we've learned that you don't have to carry the entire world. That not every pain is yours, not every burden is necessary. Carl Jung taught us that knowing yourself is liberating. And Seneca reminded us that life is too short to be wasted on things that hold no real value. Ignoring what doesn't matter is, above all, remembering what truly does. Now you know. Every time you say no to what hurts you, you're saying yes to your peace. Every time you choose stillness over rushing, presence over appearance, you come closer to your true self. And that is rare. That is beautiful. That is powerful. Ignoring what doesn't matter isn't running away from life. It is finally choosing to live it with intention. Not on autopilot, but with both feet in the present. With a lighter heart and more awakened eyes. You don't need all the answers today. You don't need to change everything at once. What you need is to take a step. One step is enough to change the path. Maybe the first no will feel hard. Maybe letting go of an old habit will scare you. But remember, life begins to change the moment you stop trying to control everything and start trusting the wisdom of your soul. That wisdom is already there, just waiting for you to listen. If this video touched your heart, if even one part of it made sense to you, carry that with you today. Come back whenever you need to remember who you are, and if you want to keep walking this journey with us, just hit subscribe. Here, we speak with truth, with depth, and with soul. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this and tell us in the comments, what are you going to start ignoring today? Because the answer you leave here might be exactly the push someone else is waiting for to change too. And just like that, together, we start creating a space where what matters can bloom, and what doesn't simply stops weighing us down.